Hey everyone, welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove. And with me, if you're watching on video, you can already see him here, is the Judge. Judge, welcome to the show. You haven't been on in
I have not, but it's great to be here.
It's good. And it's because we have a special guest, and we thought it was
right in my wheelhouse.
Right in your wheelhouse. So we decided to bring you on. So we also want to welcome, you can't see him, and we have yet to determine a nickname for him, but we're going to welcome Phil, the producer. He's in our presence. He's just waving. Yeah, he's waving.
Maybe we'll have a contest. Name the producer.
We're gonna have a contest to give Phil a nickname. Any of the nicknames we tried him out on him before we got on
some
air.
of them fit pretty nicely.
Yeah, but he's rejecting. He's rebuffing with extreme.
You've been rebuffed many times in your life.
Extreme prejudice. So, so before we bring our guest on, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to get a hold of us, you can find us on Facebook at From the Shadows Podcast. You can find us at our forum page, After the Shadows. You can find me on Instagram at Shane Grove Author. You can find us at From the Shadows Podcast on Instagram. In the good old-fashioned way, go to our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com, hit the contact button. You can send me an email. I will read it. I'll get back to you. And we especially want to hear from you if you have some experiences or a story you want to share, and you're interested in coming on and telling the story. And you don't have to come on to tell the story. You can just share it with us. A lot of people do that because they just want to get their experience out and to somebody that will listen. So with that being said, I think every episode we're releasing here this month, we're kind of discussing Monster Fest. Monster Fest is coming up June 3rd, and our special guest is a special guest at Monster Fest. And by the time this episode comes out, his new book, the Texas Dogman Triangle, will be out. So welcome to the From the Shadows podcast, Aaron Deese, author of the Texas Dogman Triangle.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. Thank you.
We are really, we're stoked. We want to hear about the book. We want to hear what's going on in Texas with the Dogman.
Yeah.
And I think our listeners love this subject matter. And they'll be super curious.
It's an interesting topic. Probably the majority of the listeners are more interested in Bigfoot, Sasquatch, but there's a large contingent of people who are fascinated with the subject matter of Dogman.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because it's, what is Dogman? Is it a physical creature, cryptid? Is it something supernatural? There's different camps. But I've heard about a lot of sightings and incidents in the state of Texas, which is a very, very different geography than Ohio. And when you think Dogman, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is Beast of Bray Road, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, the late Linda Godfrey. But Texas is, it's a far different place. So we're excited to hear what Dogman in Texas is like. Is it the same thing that's up here in Ohio?
I hear Texas and I think angry because that's what we hear about Bigfoot. Not just that the people in Texas are angry. Strike that from the record.
Well, a lot of us are. But.
You think Urban Cowboy?
Urban Cowboy.
So tell us how'd you get into the subject matter? Yeah, how'd you get into the subject matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started because my wife and I were producing an episode of our podcast called Hey Strangeness, and we have a relative who had an encounter with one of these things, and he told us about it, and we're like, oh, well, this is a great topic to do an episode on it. Let's do it. And so I did a little research, and it turns out there are two other sightings very similar to the one that this relative had on the North American Dogman Research Project website. And if you put these three sightings on a map, you get a triangle. And we're like, oh, Texas Dogman Triangle. That's a cool name. We'll call the episode that. That'll be fun. And then as we were producing other episodes and I was working on other projects, I kept running across more reports and more sightings, and then finding these folk tales that go back over 100 years in Texas concerning these upright walking canine-like creatures. And so I started putting all these sightings on a map, kind of like I had done with the original 3. And you still, ironically enough, you still see a concentration in this big triangle that runs through the center of the state. So that was really how it started and what got me invested in it. Yeah.
Well, so obviously we want to hear the story that would you say your wife's uncle had?
So it's a member of the family.
Member of the family.
Mm-hmm,
and what is special then about this triangle?
Well, that's an interesting question. Nobody's quite asked me that. What's special to me about it?
Yes, I mean, it was either what did you have for dinner or what's special about the triangle.
Well,
so I went
with the triangle.
So
it's a great question because, like, the experience that I had, the Dogman experience I had is on a small road called Temple Road in Ohio. And if you went to Google Earth and you looked at Temple Road and you juxtaposed that with Bray Road in Wisconsin, they're identical. I mean, they look almost identical. And so one could surmise, well, okay, cornfields, woods, lots of deer population, similar geography, similar topography, similar climate. Okay, it makes sense that these creatures could be there. So what is it about Texas? What is it about this triangle that seems to jump out at you as to why this would be a place that you'd be having these sightings?
You put it really well. We have a lot of woods. We have a lot of isolated areas, unpopulated, just vast stretches of unpopulated space. And a lot of these sightings are roadside sightings, people driving by at night and seeing a strange canine that either was standing on 2 legs or rose up onto 2 legs, when they noticed it. So in a way, the sighting that sparked me on this whole journey, it falls very closely in line with what we read about the Dogman of Michigan and the Beast of Bray Road. So you might say it wasn't that unique or wasn't that special in the sense that it does parallel with those other sightings. But when I saw that parallel, I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of the same thing that, Linda Godfrey has been talking about for so long. And, all honor and respect to her, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation without her. She is legend. She will always be legend. But that's really what stuck out to me, was that we have this densely packed, Texas is huge, so it's not really densely packed. But if we're looking at a map of the United States, we have this densely packed concentration of dogman or potential dogman sightings in the state of Texas. And it seemed to me like nobody was really talking about it. Like, you'd hear stories in this place or that place, or several websites I leaned into: True Horror Stories of Texas, Texas Cryptid Hunter, the North American Dogman Research Project. But all these stories were kind of separated and spread out in different places. So
the triangle, can you tell us what cities fall within that triangle?
Yeah, you're looking at the Dallas-Fort Worth area as the northernmost point.
It's a densely populated area.
It is, and there are a lot of sightings out of that space. There's a lot going on up there. Yeah, possibly even right now. Houston, of course, and in the Houston area, you have Conroe, you have Vidor, you have several Orange. You have several other sightings kind of like clustered in this corner. And then going further west, San Antonio. And that's another kind of case where there aren't a lot of sightings in San Antonio proper. We have a couple, but the areas surrounding it, such as Converse, Medina, Kerrville, we see more of a concentration. So looking at those, you also have sightings that are scattered around the middle. And again, if you put them all on a map, draw some lines, we get a big old triangle.
Now, did you come up with the idea that there was a triangle, or did somebody else come up with it?
As far as I'm aware, I came up with it. It's entirely possible that someone out there in history said Texas Dogman Triangle, and
you're giving me all the credit.
Yeah, you're getting.
Yeah, it's mine. No, I'm just, you know what? I've been told I should take credit for things and stop being overly self-deprecating, whatever. That I came up with that. Yeah, and I guess
it's a good first step.
Yeah.
So you said most of the sightings are roadside sightings, like someone's driving down the road, they see something on the side of the road, and holy smokes, this is what they see. Is it carrying off roadkill? Because my experience, the experience that I had, is very different than what, like, the people on Bray Road, they same thing. They're driving, they see something on the side. I was paced, stalked, however you want to describe it, by one of these things. So, do you have eyewitness accounts that are on foot or on, walking, or is it just basically automobile users?
There's a variety. It started with the roadside sighting and kind of spiraled out from there. But we have people who have shot these things at point blank range, and they keep moving. They don't stop. We have some folklore, some older stories, some newspaper articles alluding to that. And then there's a gentleman I spoke with in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who sees these things on his property all the time. And he'll tell you with a straight face that he put 7 rounds into one of them with 5.56 ammunition. I don't know very much about guns, but my understanding is that that's a lot of firepower. And the thing got up and kept moving. So, yeah, parallels with a lot of what we see in other places with them being aggressive, stalking people, appearing by the side of the road. But we do have a lot of on foot, up close sightings as well.
Now, because Texas is a hotbed for Bigfoot.
Yes.
So have you compared Bigfoot sightings and geographically to the Dogman sightings? Do they exist in the same area? Or
yes.
Really?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. There's actually a chapter in the book called The Sasquatch Connection where I make that comparison, because a lot of times you'll read these reports and the comments or the responses you'll see are, oh, well, that was a Sasquatch. That's a Sasquatch sighting. Well, one, we don't know that. We don't know. Science hasn't figured out what Sasquatch is yet, so we don't know what that is. 2, in the reports that are more decidedly Dogman-like, that's in air quotes because, again, we don't know what these things are. You're seeing the pointed ears a lot. You're seeing the glowing eyes. You're seeing people describing the biggest dog I've ever seen, or implicitly using the term werewolf or wolfman. The other thing we see in these sightings that I'm sure you guys have run across in your experiences and your research is that people are afraid of these things. They leave people with impressions of lasting fear, and in some cases, what we could call post-traumatic stress disorder. These are not pleasant encounters. They don't leave people going, well, that was cool. I saw a monster today. Sasquatch encounters, you read about that as well. But it seems to me, based on my research and the people I've talked to, we see this more often with Dogman encounters, more consistently. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, as silly as it sounds, it may be easier to wrap your arms around seeing a great ape that's 8-9 feet tall than it is to see a werewolf.
Right? Yeah.
Or even just a dog. If it was just a dog, it's not very common to see a dog running around on 2 legs.
No. And dogs can do that. Canines can walk on 2 legs. We see precedent for that, all throughout nature. There was a video out of the UK very recently that you guys may have seen where someone recorded a fox in their garden walking on 2 legs. It was the front legs, not the rear ones, but it shows us that animals. And
I had a beagle. He got hit by a car, broke his back legs, and the vet said put him to sleep. And of course, I was a 12-year-old kid, cried, didn't want him put to sleep. So he brought him in the patio, and we put him in there, and he would walk like a gymnast, where his back legs flipped over the front, and he walked on his front paws. And he did that for about 6 or 8 weeks, and then eventually the legs healed, and he gimped around a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
When you talk about bipedal, you're talking about something, and the thing that I saw was about 6 foot tall, But the interesting thing that I come back to when we start talking about Bigfoot and Sasquatch in the same vicinity. So if we just look at the animal kingdom, okay, when 2 super predators share the same area, like go over to Africa, hyenas and lions, when they share, they obviously have to share the same food source, water source, things like that. They fight with each other all the time. I mean, they just do. So do you have anything in your research that talks about battling dogmen and Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
Honestly, no. I have some reports that indicate they may be sharing territory, and that's talked about in the book. There's a gentleman named Rod Nichols who's a excellent researcher. He's been on the ground in the San Antonio area researching Sasquatch for the last like 6 years. And he's recorded and sent me some very, very large canine prints in areas where he's also found very large hominid looking prints. So, we do see the potential for them to be sharing territory. I have not found any stories or encounters where they, are at odds with each other. So,
yeah, because I think that's some of the lore from the land between the lakes.
Yeah.
That's a hotly contested territory between Bigfoot. Now, of course, like you said, we don't know. That's just the story.
So, and that takes us into another question. Maybe we're diving in a little too fast, but this is just how this thing goes when you're organic, like we are. So, there's two, to the best of my knowledge, and maybe there's more, but there's two main camps about Dogman. One, it's a biological creature. Its genus falls somewhere in with dogs, wolves, and whatever. It's a highly evolved where it can walk on two legs. It's bigger, it's larger. Okay. That's one camp. It's a real creature. Flesh and blood. You shoot it, kill it. It mates. And then there's the other camp, which has a supernatural component to it. And if you follow along with Linda Godfrey, she was convinced that when you, like you did, you start taking sightings of dogmen and then you compare that to Indian burial grounds and they overlay it. And we found that with my dogman experiences that, after we had talked to Linda about that, from where I had first encountered this thing, there was a Indian burial ground
in the field,
a couple 100 yards away, maybe. So from your research, what camp are you seeing people in? And then we'll put you on the hot seat and ask you what camp you're in.
Oh yeah. Hit me.
So what camp are you seeing people in? Are they in, this is a flesh and blood creature, or is this a supernatural, multi-dimensional ghost creature, what have you?
So the majority of the sightings that I've researched and the people I've talked to, and the majority of what I was able to find in Texas, we're looking at cryptozoology. We're looking at an unidentified animal. We're looking at something that lives, breathes, eats, and they appear near water sources. They appear near large populations of white-tailed deer. They appear in national parks and on ranches. So that makes sense. But not every sighting falls in there. You have encounters where people talk about them changing shape, not just standing up onto two legs, but seeming to actually change form. There is a story that was originally featured in Fate magazine, which we were able to include the original text from the article in the book. I'm so excited about that. Heather Mosier was able to set that up. But we have one where she described it as having a wolf-like body and a human face. I can't explain that. That doesn't fit in with an unidentified animal. That doesn't make sense. So we have representation for both types of cases, but the majority are what seems to be an unidentified animal. And the gentleman I mentioned a few minutes ago who says, yeah, I've shot these things a bunch of times and they don't die. I asked him point blank, what are you dealing with here? And he says, I think it's an animal. I think it doesn't die easily, but it's another animal. So it really depends who you ask. It depends who you talk to.
So that begs the question: if this is a cryptid creature, then it eats, it sleeps, it mates, it goes in season, but it's going to defecate and urinate and expel waste. And nobody seems, and this is one of them subject matters, nobody ever seems to find any scat or any physical evidence, any hair, at least up in our area. Nobody finds anything that links this to a biological creature, a cryptid. Now, but at the same time, when you went to Bray Road, there were people that described seeing this thing eating roadkill. Well, if it's a supernatural creature, why the heck is it eating?
Yeah.
Why is it eating?
Yeah.
So.
And roadkill.
And roadkill. I mean, why is it not
just supernatural? Get a steak.
But why is it not hunting down fresh meat? So, so if you were to guess, what camp are you in?
most of the time the cryptozoology camp, the unidentified animal. Without giving away too much from the documentary, the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State, I don't think we can explain every case with one explanation. I think more than one thing is happening. There are too many cases that run so close to the supernatural line, or what we think of as being, oh, well, this is definitely supernatural. I can't write it off as just one thing. It just doesn't work. And I feel like I'm one of those people that's like, okay, once we've looked at so many strange things that we can't explain, we have to accept that we can't explain them. So I maybe I'm taking the coward's way out. I kind of fall into both camps.
But if you're gonna, it's a very clever stance to take because I mean, once you get into the Sasquatch world, I mean, that line is drawn really, really. I mean, as soon as, I mean, if you start talking, well, there's these orbs and they're possible aliens, you will piss off.
Oh yeah,
a certain segment, and vice versa. So Dogman, I think, is a little more. I think people are a little more open-minded on both sides. Like, well, and I think part of it is because, look, we don't.
There's just not the evidence.
Yeah, there's. I mean,
the eyewitness sightings or the footprint evidence or the
the footprint evidence of Bigfoot is all over the place. And yes, some of them are faked without a doubt.
Of course.
But there's so many of them. There's just so many of them. And there's been a lot of experts. And people, there's people who are legit scientists, experts, who look at it and say, that wasn't fake. That wasn't some form that somebody put in there. But with Dogman, we don't have that. I mean, and I know you talked about there's some people that are seeing prints, but you just don't find them. And maybe it's just the nature of where they're at.
And I'll play devil's advocate for a second, and just ask, like, would we know if we did? If you're in the woods and you see some bones, and okay, let's assume this is a Dogman skeleton, it's going to look like wolf bones. It's going to look like coyote bones. We see a canine footprint. Oh, well, that could be a large dog. That could be a Mastiff. That could be a Grand Pyrenees. You mentioned hair samples and excrement earlier. We don't know what to look for. So it's dog hair. It's dog scat. And that's kind of why I keep bouncing back to, but I can't write it off as a zoological entity, because how would we know? Would we know we had this evidence unless we had a full, the same thing people say with Bigfoot. We're never going to prove it till we have a body. Would we know it's a Dogman if we didn't have a full body? So, yeah.
Well, the thing that, I go back and I vacillate back and forth, but it would be a huge coincidence that these sightings always seem to be around Indian burial grounds. Now, I don't know in the state of Texas, in this triangle area that you're talking about, what burial grounds may or may not be, because you're talking about a huge area. I mean, that area you're talking about from Dallas, Fort Worth to Houston to San Antonio proper. I mean, Jiminy Christmas, how many square miles is in that?
Well, and that's the thing. We don't know which lands were native land and where these burial grounds may be or may not be. Like, we know some of them, but we don't know all of them. This place is huge. It is enormous. 6 independent nations have been sovereign here. So we've had so many people in and out from different parts of the world, so many rich native cultures, that go back so far. We just have no idea. And in the course of researching this book, I ran into some Comanche folklore. I spoke with a gentleman who's of Apache descent. There's a lot of Native American lands down here, and who's to say that we know where they all are? This morning, picking up my son, I drove past a Navajo Civic Center, and I live in San Antonio. I'm not, anywhere near a reservation that I'm aware of. So, the Native American presence here, it goes back so far and is so thick, it's impossible for us to say, really.
Gotcha.
So, well, first of all, that might be why the Dogmen down there are so angry, because there is such a, you know what I'm saying? It seems like it's such a,
well, I mean, if you
convergence of so many maybe cultures.
If you're in the one camp, you say, look, Dogmen are guardians of these burial grounds. Okay. Well, there would be burial grounds upon burial grounds.
Yeah.
Tribes versus tribes,
and that's not the way. Like in Ohio, that's not the way it is. There are certain
right
place. territory.
And understand Native American culture. Native American culture was a series of conquests and conquests and conquests. So, sometimes people say, well, you need to give this land back to the original inhabitants. Well, how would you even know who those people were?
I don't know.
Because they conquered each other.
Yeah.
I mean, they conquered each other, enslaved each other. And so, yeah, what burial grounds? It's a lot easier in Ohio. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
It's a lot easier in Ohio.
Yeah. Down here we had French settlers. We had, of course, the native populations. We have folks from Germany. You have, just such a mixing of people here. Of course, we have Latin American heritage that inundates, much of the state. We don't know. We don't know who lived here when necessarily. I'm not, an expert historian, but there's so much history. We don't know,
So I want to ask, so what story in the book or not in the book was the one as you were told it, sat and wrote, that gave you the most pause, that you did not want to be in those people's shoes?
Oh, that's a great question. I got to go back to the gentleman in Dallas, Fort Worth, who goes by John in the book. I don't want one of these things to charge me down from 5 yards away. I don't want that to happen.
So he was 5 yards away from one, and it came at him.
Yes. And that was when I was talking to him, and I've said this in other interviews before. When I was originally talking to him, I was like, man, I can't write this down. I can't put this in the book. Nobody's going to believe me, because he's seen these things up close. He's put rounds into them. He's pursued them. He's been pursued by them. But with a straight face, 110%, when you talk to people, when you interview a lot of people, and my day job until very recently involved talking to people, you kind of get a sense when somebody doesn't believe what they're saying. I'm totally convinced this guy believes what he's saying. So hearing his stories about how he's seen these things up close and how he shot at them and how he feels they pose a threat to his family, that really made me stop for a second and go, holy crap, what is this stuff? Yeah.
So from 5 yards away, then how did this story, he obviously lived to tell,
so the way he describes it, and there's a few encounters he describes, but this one, he kind of met it in a clearing. He described it as the biggest dog I've ever seen. He said, and then it stood up. And I stopped him and I said, can you clarify? What do you mean by stood up? And he said, it stood up on two legs. It stood up like a person. And it charged at him. And he specifically said, I don't know if it was a bluff charge. I don't know if it actually meant to attack me. This guy, born and bred in the hill country, ex-military, ex-law enforcement, he knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. He said he put 2 rounds into it, and it fell down. He put 3 more into it. And the only reason he was able to stop its charge is because he shot it. What's the most polite way I can say it?
Say it however you want.
Shot it in the balls is how he described it to me. And he said that put it down, but didn't kill it. While it was on the ground, he shot it 3 more times. So that's 5 rounds. And as it was running away, it got up after that and was like, okay, I've had enough. He put 2 more into it. And it kept running.
So he ruined the Dogman's weekend.
but I guess the question is, when you hear that story, it almost makes it sound supernatural,
right? And I asked
why. And here's and I'm not doubting. I'm not calling BS on the guy's story.
No, yeah, we got to.
But if you shoot an animal that many times, it's going to leave tissue. It's going to leave blood. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to find out what this is. I'm going to call in Ohio the Ohio Department of Natural Resources or whatever, ODNR. And we're going to say, hey, listen, this thing's out here. I don't know what it is. It charged me. I shot it 7 times. By the way, look at this trail of blood. Look at this tissue sample. Because I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure what creature, if you shot 5 times, including in the testicles, this is just going to get up and get away. You know what I mean?
Tupac did.
I mean,
but that
the first time.
So what I'm saying is, so on one sense, you make the argument, or he makes the argument, this is a cryptid, but it kind of sells it as well. What could have done that unless it has a supernatural component to it?
I agree with you. Yeah.
And I remember watching, was it Tear in the Woods or something like that? It's a guy from North Carolina. He's telling the story, and they're going to go camping, and he gets out, and he unloads a 357 Magnum, drills it right in the shoulder, and it just takes the round like it's nothing. Like, okay. So, and I remember hearing that story going, well, okay, there are animals that could take a heavy slug, but a 357 Magnum and not even flinch. You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense, because, look, we're made, assuming it's a cryptid, it's made of flesh and bone.
Mm-hmm.
357 Magnum, the cartridge is going to go through it's going to take out bone. It's going to take out muscle. I don't care how tough you are. That's going to destroy tendons, tissue, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. How are you going to move? So on the one hand, it makes the argument, oh yeah, this is a flesh and blood creature because I saw it, I shot it, I could tell, I heard it. But at the same time, if it was a real flesh and blood creature, it would have caused such damage to it that it would probably die, or you'd find tissue, you'd find all kinds of stuff. So
what is his plan the next time?
I asked him that. I said, "What do you do anything differently now?" Because he lives on 100 acres. He oversees 50 head of cattle, if I remember correctly. I don't even remember my own book. Jeez. And I was like, "What are you doing anything differently now? Or are you just minding your business?" And he was like, "Honestly, I pretty much do things the way I did before, but instead of only carrying my sidearm, I always take my rifle, because that's what he used the time that he was able to make it run off, I guess." So I don't know if he has a plan. I reached out to him about 3 months ago and just asked, "Have you seen anything else lately? I'm finalizing the book. I have a little bit of time that I could, if there have been any updates, I'd like to include them." And he said they've gone quiet recently. So, haven't talked to him since then.
Maybe the 7 rounds in the torso did it.
Maybe, and you see. Yeah. This may seem like super out of left field, but we have other paranormal lore where we have encounters with strange creatures that are resistant to gunfire. The Hopkinsville goblins, very similar case, the Caracas dwarves, which we don't hear a lot about, but which took place the year before, where you have these alien entities showing up, multiple witnesses, UFO sightings, people take shots at them and it doesn't do anything. So then we got to go, okay, well, are they aliens? And then we have to stop and go, well, wait, what are aliens? Are they interdimensional? Are they, so it becomes this spiral of what ifs. But I love that you asked that question. If they're animals, why don't they just die? And that's not the only encounter in the book where we have people shooting at them at point blank range and they continue to move. So
were they after his cattle, or, had they taken some? And
he didn't mention that specifically. His words to me specifically, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but anything that poses a threat to my cattle, I shoot. No, that was what he said. I think I got it. That was the quote. So, seeing a large, presumably predatory creature, a large canine on your property, he didn't really ask questions. He just immediately took a shot at it. And then since then has had these recurring encounters.
And I got to be honest, as a guy who his family has a farm and we have cattle, there's not many dogs that would pose a threat to cattle.
Cattle are huge. And then again, like we talk about cattle, the Plum Creek monster, we had these stories of cattle mutilations involving, or correlating with sightings of these wolf-like creatures. And then there's also one out of Paradise, also near the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where this guy was finding dead cattle on his property and then saw this wolf thing. So if it's a regular dog, how is it taking down these enormous bovine creatures? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't think people are mistaking regular dogs for dogmen. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just based upon the features that are described.
But that would be someone who can't wrap their arms or mind or anything around this. That's what they're going to say. Oh, you just saw a dog, just like a regular German Shepherd or something. That's what you saw. Okay.
And going back to my sighting that I had, if when I saw, and I'm not know if you're familiar with my story, But if I would have seen this thing on all fours, I probably would have thought, oh my gosh, that's a huge dog. But when I saw it, excuse me, it was bipedal. It was standing up and had the Anubis head, which didn't really look like a dog. And so, no, I knew it wasn't a dog.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would if I would have just seen it probably on all fours, I might have been at night. I might have been fooled into thinking, "Oh, wow, that's a really, really big dog."
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you mentioned Anubis, because that's a piece of this puzzle too. You know, we have these modern sightings and these modern encounters, but we've been talking about these things for thousands of years. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Scotch Irish, or Scottish and Irish, sorry, that's probably not the proper term. Like, they're all over the world. Native American cultures, Mesoamerican cultures. So why have we all been writing about and drawing dogs that can walk on two legs for thousands of years? Why?
Interesting thing was, when I was on Sasquatch Chronicles, and Wes was telling me that research he had heard these dogman creatures predate Egyptian civilization. They go all the way back to Mesopotamia, and there's Mesopotamian sightings of these things. So these things have
there's a whole like culture
right.
of dog people, so to speak, that they were like a certain, like they had a territory and they, acted as like
what's weird is that they if they you take a highly evolved species that was interacting with human beings, early civilization, cradles of civilization, and now suddenly they're creeping around the triangle of Texas and Ohio and stuff like that.
Yeah. Boy,
why aren't they trading with me?
Yeah. They really hit skids.
They have.
They really hit the skids. So in your research there in Texas, is there anybody who has attributed any of these sightings to skinwalkers?
That's a tough one, because again, we kind of get into the question of what is a skinwalker. It's one of those things that, folks like me who come from outside Native culture I don't know. I don't know what that's about. And my understanding is generally it's frowned upon to talk about. So, that's hard to say. But again, I have spoken with folks who are of Native American descent who say, yeah, I grew up with this. There's a gentleman out of the Medina Lake area, which is, very populated, but also very spread out. Same thing, a lot of water, a lot of white-tailed deer, a lot of woods, similar topography to what we see with other sightings. And he told me, I grew up with these stories. My grandfather told me he saw one back in the 60s. And I have people to this day in the same area who tell me that they see them. So
even then they treated them as specifically dogmen type creatures, and it wasn't part of like the skinwalker lore.
As far as I'm aware, yeah. The term skinwalker has not come up in my research, other than people making, of course, that natural correlation. The one story that really kind of runs that line is out of Clio, Texas, which is now a ghost town. But I'm sorry, my cat's having a fit.
Yeah, because we're talking about Dogman.
Hey, stop talking about that thing. I told you, stop talking about that thing. But
I gotta be honest, as a mailman, I'm kind of squirming too a little bit talking so much about dogs.
But there's a story out of Clio, Texas, which is now a ghost town, called the Beast of Bear Creek, and allegedly this was a Native American shaman who could take on the form of an upright wolf, and he would do so in order to take revenge on the white settlers who had harmed his people. Details on the story are very scant. Like some of the others that are in the book, we don't have much other than like modern oral tradition, which is people who grew up in the Texas Hill Country hearing these stories and have now put them on their personal websites. So we don't really know where that story comes from. We don't know if there was a Native American shaman in Clio, Texas at that time. We just don't have all that information. But there is at least one within the triangle that runs very, very close to the idea of the skinwalker. Yeah.
So you've written the book. It's gonna get rolled out here, and everybody's expecting big things. That's what I keep hearing. They're expect big things. So now that you are known around Texas as that Dogman guy, are you getting inundated with even more stories and people coming to you, or not? Is it just the same, or are you expecting some more action here once the book officially comes out?
I've actually had 2 eyewitness encounters that are not in the book because I found out about them after it went to publication. So those are obviously in the second edition ? Folder on my desktop. My hope, very much, I'm really glad you asked that question. My hope is that other people who have seen things that correlate with these sightings, or maybe even, remotely resemble them, will stop for a second and go, oh, wait, I'm not the only one. Maybe I didn't just see a strange dog and then I imagined some stuff. I'm very, very hopeful that this will bring people out of the woodwork, because if I was able to identify 20 odd sightings over the last 100 years, and we're not generally talking about the Texas Dogman very much, there have to be others. The law of sales is 1 in 7. So if I found 1 in 7 reports, there are dozens that we just don't know about yet. So I really, if you're listening to this and you've seen a strange dog in Texas, please look me up. You're not alone. We have things to discuss.
From a statistics standpoint, when I was reading one of Linda's books early on, because when I first had my experience, I had no frame of reference. It was the 80s, and there was no internet or anything like that. So
yeah, nobody was talking about that.
Reference of what a Dogman was. It didn't strike me as a werewolf. And I've said this before. My idea of the werewolf was Lon Chaney Jr. Mm-hmm. Wearing a pair of pants and a shirt and grabbing ladies and throwing them over his arm, and in the flat face. What I saw was something I'd never seen before. And so for years, the first thing that I thought of when I reflect is it looked like the Egyptian god Anubis, but I never expect why. Hey, the Egyptian god Anubis just showed up in Ohio. I never thought for a moment that's who it was. Mm-hmm. But for years, I never told anybody what I saw, because there was no frame of reference to it. Yeah. There was no internet. There was no stories being written. So when I was reading Linda's book and someone described, she was given an accounting, and she said the person described it as looking like the Egyptian god Anubis. I said, that's exactly what I saw. Okay, I have a frame of reference. I have something that's now called Dogman. But I think, and I can't remember which book of hers it was, but she said at the time that she had written that book, there had been 2,500 recorded sightings. And then the question was, well, mine wasn't recorded. How many people see these things and just don't tell anybody? And you think about it, like when I saw my sighting, I was going to pick up the phone and call the county sheriff, and the sheriff say, "Hey, quit! Hey, kids,
attention! I see the dog
in trouble." Yeah. I mean, like today, how many people are going to call the Department of Natural Resources?
Well, no,
the sheriff, always a game warden.
They don't have to, because
they call us.
They call podcasters and authors, really.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah,
so
really.
From a statistic standpoint, who is actually keeping track of the statistics? It's almost like how many people disappear at Yellowstone every year, right? Like, who's keeping track of that?
Yeah. Sorry, we're the Park Service, and it's going to cost millions of dollars for us to give you that information. But anyway, right. Sorry.
So it's important for people like you to go and collect those stories and put them out. Someplace where somebody can read them and identify with somebody's story, and then contact you or hear you on our show or any other show and say, okay, these guys, they believe these stories. They believe there's a possibility of these being real creatures. So I can tell. I mean,
there's obviously there are people that will fabricate stories and make stuff up.
Sure.
And they have various motives for doing it. Okay, maybe pecuniary or maybe just for attention. I don't know. But because of the thousands and thousands of sightings, not thousands and thousands of people are making this up.
No.
So and we appreciate you creating basically a way for people to research the subject matter, hear these stories in a concise, edition where you can just read them all. And like I said, people who are a fan of the subject matter, I don't think they even think of Texas as
No.
is a hotbed for Dogman.
I was totally shocked. Like I'm like I don't know anything about Texas.
I had heard I like once again episode of Terror in the Woods or These Woods Are Haunted. There was an episode of some guys from Texas who were out on a boat. They went in, they went across this lake, and lo and behold, they had this Dogman experience, scared the hell out of them, blah, blah. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of Texas having Dogman. I'm like, well, I thought this was a Midwest thing. What's going on here? Yeah. So, yeah, it fascinates me that. And what about colors? Does anyone describe colors? Like,
generally, I'm hearing black to gray, or dark brown, possibly. Pretty consistent with what we hear in other Dogman sightings. And a little bit of a side diversion regarding your encounter, Judge. American Werewolves was definitely a creative inspiration and motivator for this project. So you guys helped with this, whether you realize it or not.
Well, actually, the Diane, the second lady on there, was also on she told her story for the first time on our podcast.
And the only reason why she did it was because she heard my story, right? And she had not told anybody since
50 years.
50 years.
Yeah. So it is important. It is important, for people, if you're listening and you question whether or not you want to come forward and talk about your experience.
And if you have anybody that you've talked to that'd like to come on our podcast to tell their story in detail, because obviously the devil's in the details, and we'd love to hear the details.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
We'd love to have them on the show.
So I would encourage anybody listening that if you have a Dogman encounter, after you contact us, we'll get you a hold of Aaron, and he can start working on Dogman of the United States instead of just Texas. Why just make him just the Texas guy? Let's make him everywhere, right?
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's get together. Let's talk werewolves.
Since Linda's left us.
Yeah.
Man, my one regret during this project is that I didn't get to interface with her and kind of get her blessing. You know what I mean? Just because I owe so much to her for the work that she did and the trails that she blazed. Like, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation without her.
Yeah, she was on our podcast and was fascinating. We even talked to her off air, and she gave us some some insight that I'm just telling you, I never expected her to talk about, because I was a fan and I had read her books, and she starts telling us these stories about orbs and people getting cancer after seeing the orbs. And I mean, she took us down into the rabbit hole that I never experienced. And she was saying that there's all these people who had been doing research and for Dogman had seen these orbs, that there was this crazy statistic of how many of those people got cancer. And so the theory,
including her.
And the theory was that, these things are interdimensional beings that are traveling from dimensions through energy, which might be, have radioactive isotopes or whatever. I'm not a scientist, don't get me wrong. And that because of that, the producer over here, who's yet to be named,
he's yet to be named, chuckles finally.
The scientist, the physicist, but it's being around that energy.
Yeah.
And you think about it, and it was an interesting, I read somewhere one time that said, if we went back in time to Newton and some of the Da Vinci and some of the greatest scientific minds, and we put radioactive material, they would have no idea what it was. They would be monkeying around with it, studying it. Next thing you know, they'd have cancer and they die. So, here's these orbs that she had seen multiple orbs and people. She told us a story where she was in a car and they were doing a stakeout on this property, and this huge orb comes, and there's 3 or 4 people that are researchers in a car with. They all saw it, they all experienced it, and like I said, she took the genre, the subject matter, in an area that never thought it would go.
Yeah, so I'm sure she would give
you 2 thumbs up.
She'd appreciate.
I appreciate.
She'd appreciate your picking up the mantle and
running
with it. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
So let's finish this by what is your role at Monster Fest? Because I think the judge and I are still trying to figure out. I think Seth has me parking cars, and you're like the bathroom attendant, right, Judge? I don't know what our role.
Oh, I'm the trash can guy.
You're the trash can.
That's great. We'll meet in the break room.
Monster Fest,
yeah. So what are you going to be doing at Monster Fest? Anything special?
Yeah, so I get to sit on a panel. I believe that's Friday night with my buddy Jeremiah Byron. I'm sorry, there's a cat outside that's just having a meltdown. My buddy Jeremiah Byron over at Bigfoot Society, Seth, Alex, a bunch of cool people are on that panel, and I'm so excited about it. I can't remember everybody's names. And then, I know their names. I just can't. I don't have the list in front of me. And then beyond that, I think I'm just hanging out. I think I'm just gonna, say hi to people and sign books and be around. If they ask me
over to our booth, I think it's gonna be in the back corner where there's no house. In the shadows.
There you go. No, they're saving the best for last. You have to go on this whole journey, and then you enter this mystical cave, and there you guys are. Yeah. But yeah, I'll find you. No, I'll be there. Yeah, I'll just be hanging out, as far as I know, living my best life. So.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to getting to meet you in person.
Heck
and,
yeah.
And hopefully everybody that goes out to Monster Fest stops by and sees you, picks up a copy of the book.
Please.
If you don't get it ahead of time, hopefully after they hear this, they're going to want to get it.
They'll want to get a copy.
Yeah.
So how do you get a copy of your book?
Yeah.
Oh, great question. You can get it on Amazon. It's available for pre-order on the Small Town Monsters web store. If you get it from Small Town Monsters, you are paying less for it, and you are, you are buying it straight from the publisher as opposed to paying a cut to a third party. So
Phil, cut out the part where he said buy it from Amazon. Buy it from the Small Town Monsters.
If the only way you can get it is through Amazon, get it, please, definitely. But
small businesses, and
yeah,
I don't want to say the Small Town Monsters is small, but it is the first word in their title. So
yeah, they are independent creators, and everything they do with passion. So if you can purchase it directly from them and support them more directly, that's please do that. Yeah.
Can we get an autograph copy that says "To my best friend Shane Grove"?
Sure. I'm gonna have to restrain myself because I've always wanted to be an author. This is literally a dream come true for me. I'm gonna have to stop myself from taking books out of people's hands and going, just let me sign this real quick. So yeah, I'll be happy to. I'll write whatever you want in there. That's fine.
All right. Well, Aaron, I'm glad we got this interview in before Monster Fest, and hopefully everybody will listen and be looking forward to going and meeting you in person.
I'm looking forward to reading the book. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at Monster Fest. Those of you who are going to show up to Monster Fest, I don't know where we're going to be. We're going to have a booth. I don't know where Seth is putting us. But come and visit us. We'd love to meet some of you folks. And
and Phil will be there. And we are going to have the jar of Name the Producer. Everybody will be able to write on a piece of paper. And maybe we'll have Aaron pull out the winning.
I'm gonna put a couple in there. I got some ideas. We'll save them for the drawing.
All right, Aaron. Well, hey, we appreciate you hanging out with us. It was great to talk to you, and
keep up the good work.
We'll see you in a week.
Thank you, guys. Can't wait.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.